My dad's Jewish and my mom's Gentile.
I would say I'm half Jewish because of my mother being Jewish and my father being Gentile.
My mom's Christian and my dad's Jewish agnostic.
God is Jewish.
God is God. I don't believe God specifically is Jewish or is Christian or Catholic or Hindu or Muslim.
God doesn't have a religion. He doesn't follow a religion.
When Marilyn dated him, and I knew he was not a Christian, I felt that we could not have this.
I'm not happy she married a Gentile, but I would rather have her marry someone she's happy with than marry a person within the Jewish religion and not have it work out.
I was disappointed because I expected Scott to marry a Jewish girl.
It's kind of nice having one of God's chosen in our family. Really neat.
He took a pan and he put butter in the pan and he pan-fried gefilte fish.
I didn't know I was supposed to eat it cold. How am I supposed to know?
But you actually still liked it and ate it.
Well,
that's
you know.
that's.
Is there a problem with that? I think.
A popular East Coast cafe caters exclusively to interfaith couples, serving such delicacies as pastrami tea sandwiches and lobster kreplach. Families celebrate the holidays by hanging dreidels on their Christmas tree and eating ham on matzah. A new community is emerging as interfaith marriages between Jews and non-Jews has climbed over 60% in the last 10 years. Of Jewish people who are married, over half of them are married to non-Jews. In other words, the intermarried community is becoming the majority in the Jewish world. There was a time when Jews and Gentiles inhabited separate worlds, and interfaith marriage was viewed as nothing less than a calamity. But what was once inconceivable has now become commonplace. Issues involving Jews marrying non-Jews have been prevalent for years in popular movies and television shows. Swarming to blockbusters and sipping lattes, couples from diverse religious backgrounds meet and marry. If asked about their sense of identity, most newly married or newly engaged couples would cite Jewish or Gentile very low on the scale. Yet despite this, unexpected tensions surrounding cultural, family, and religious issues threaten to pull apart these marriages. Some couples have found solutions to these unexpected hurdles in surprising ways.
You're a Sikh, Catholic, Muslim with Jewish in-laws?
Yes. Yes. It gets very complicated.
It's amazing how little time couples spend preparing for their marriages by dealing with issues of substance. They may discuss being joined together physically, they may talk about issues of personality and decision-making, but very little time is spent on discussing spiritual unity, and that's a tragedy, because spiritual unity is the foundation of a marriage, and when that foundation is fractured or missing, the entire marriage is built on shaky ground.
When Eric and I met, we were first friends, and the relationship developed into more than a friendship. And at that point, we would just talk about different subjects, and one subject happened to be religion.
There was one point we were at a restaurant and again talking about religion and the differences between Christianity and Judaism. That, I think, was the beginning of knowing that this was going to be not just a one subject conversation, and it was going to be done and finished in one sitting.
We met in an ice cream shop in Indiana about 7 years ago, and we started dating in Indiana, and we jumped right into talking about family and politics and religion.
Yeah, the first date was unbelievable. I mean, the thing people usually say not to do is talk about religion and politics on the first date.
That's exactly what we did.
Exactly.
I was the first Jewish person that Blake had ever met, and he was the first real, Christian person that I had ever spent any time with.
We continued to date and
argue and fall in love over a couple of years.
We met at Heffron's, a place called Heffron's in Long Island, New York. Real popular night spot.
And I said my famous line, Sherry, did you meet your knight in white shining armor? And she said,
God, what makes you think I'm looking for one?
And unfortunately, and I sobbed and I walked across the dance floor by myself carrying these balloons.
And then he came back.
I came back, or did you come back?
No way, you came back.
Okay, maybe I came back then. When we first met, I don't even think we discussed religion. I know Sherry must have asked me, what are you? And I said I was Jewish, and Sherry said she was Catholic.
My parents had never indicated to me that they wanted me to marry in the Catholic faith.
Same here.
I noticed Tom in my geometry class in high school. I was 16 years old. And he was hard to miss because he always wore this brown hat. It was kind of like a Billy Jack hat. Yeah.
Oh, whatever. It's a leather hat.
Yeah. And he just had he was just really cool.
I think it's also because I had my guitar with me. I think, that attracts people, right?
And so I wrote him a note, and happily he wrote back. As we got older, I was still a teenager, but an older teenager, the frequency with which I was seeing Tom became a problem for my parents. Not that anything academically was suffering, but definitely they felt they wanted me to date more and other people, and hopefully Jewish people.
A bird may love a fish, but where would they build a home together?
Who was going to marry us? Would it be a priest, a rabbi?
We were married by a friend of mine who was a notary.
My parents were both very open to his traditions.
Lynn's parents were not really so supportive.
Would it be at a temple? Would it be at a church?
We didn't have the wedding in a church.
We were married on the beach.
The wedding ceremony was fabulous.
My mother-in-law did not want a priest.
We got married under a chuppah.
I smashed the glass.
But it was beautiful. Kind of 60s influenced wedding.
We won't have a rabbi and we won't have a priest.
We had a unity candle which had the Star of David and the cross, which probably offended everyone.
Well, that's pretty much a dream come true for a nice Jewish family.
No one was completely happy, but we were.
We were.
You go into an interfaith marriage with a little different background than you would into a similar faith one. Obviously, there are things that need to be discussed.
Aside from the normal problems, now their culture enters into it, and that becomes a big issue for both sides.
During the wedding, one of Sherry's relatives had a huge cross. Huge wooden cross.
Around his neck, and had a huge picture of Jesus that he gave us as a wedding gift. And I remember going up to my uncle and asking him to kindly tuck the cross into his shirt.
The pastor came to my house and he brought some sample wedding programs. And these were just programs that he's used at services that he's done in the past. And
she didn't like any of them, really.
But my mom picked up one that was extremely Lutheran, extremely focused on Christ, and it was full of all different things that were very offensive to her. And she started screaming and yelling. This is with guests in the house the day of the wedding, saying, you're turning your back on your Jewish heritage. How can you do this?
Holidays were a lot of fun around our house because we were able to really just celebrate all of them.
The only thing that we didn't do in our home, because it was such an offense to my parents, we would celebrate Christmas, but we would not have a tree in our home, because that was a real, to them, a real symbol of Christianity.
A tangible way for them to say that this is
not a Jewish home.
Right.
You guys don't get trees, huh? We got to talk about it, me and Hope. Ugh, this is so weird. I love Christmas. I do. I used to love it with Hope, but now the tree's not just a tree. Right. I see this tree. I see it in my living room. I see my grandfather rising up from the grave and having another heart attack. I do. Now there's Janie. Yeah. What do I want to tell her about who I am? Yeah. What if she totally loves this? I don't know where that leaves me.
When a Jewish person all of a sudden has to go over to his in-laws and decorate Christmas trees or hunt for Easter eggs, that's foreign for Jewish people. They might enjoy it when it's outside their family, but in their own family with their own children, all of a sudden they have to be able to compromise with their in-laws.
I packed up my menorah. We went to Indiana to visit Blake's family, and I've got it like kind of hidden in the guest room in their house, and I'm secretly lighting the candles every night. Well, one night, the family had decided they wanted to go out for dinner. Well, I had just lit all of the candles, and they wanted me to blow them out so that we could all leave.
They absolutely did not understand that you do not blow out Hanukkah candles.
Well, I was in major internal conflict. The horror of blowing out, I thought I was going to, burn up. So, I did something you're not supposed to do, and I felt really, really bad about it, and I blew them out, and I went to dinner, and I was mad the whole night.
And actually, at the time, even I didn't really understand why she was so frustrated about, having to blow out what I thought was being a few silly little candles.
When I was raised in Long Island, I look back and I was called Jew boy, kike. I used to have fights all the time in the neighborhood. Everybody told me that the Jews killed Jesus, and it was very difficult those holidays. And even when I would visit Sherry's family, I pushed back.
I don't think that's why
Wish they would have children.
It's their life. I really like Margie, but all my friends had Jewish daughters, and I was waiting for them to make a move on Scott.
I wish she would have married a Jewish person, but she didn't, and that's her life.
Barry's mother asked me if I would be upset if Marilyn converted to Judaism. And I looked at Ella, and I said, I would be very upset.
There are families in which they just don't even talk to each other anymore because of this hideous sin of intermarriage that they feel has been committed.
My parents were not happy with my choosing to marry Tom, particularly in the area of faith. We're never going to be able to spend holidays together again because she's not marrying someone Jewish. We're not going to be able to see my daughter in a Jewish wedding. We're not going to be able to see our grandchildren, should we have any, have a bris or be bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah or any of the Jewish traditions that they held very dear. It wasn't that they held God dear, but they held the Jewish traditions dear.
They weren't sure, how I would embrace their Judaism or
even if you would.
Right, and if it was going to be a problem. But they, perceived that it would be a problem, and so therefore it was going to be.
We'd be at home and we would have received a letter or a phone call from the grandparents saying, how are the two of you doing? By the way, here's a leaflet, here's a brochure, here's a booklet we're sending. Basically trying to provide us with more information in working out our differences together.
And the two of us would go home to my parents' house and go to church, of course, with my family. And it was always a point of my mother. So after the sermon, how did you feel about that, Eric? What do you think? What do you believe?
It was a question and answer time.
Definitely.
I was not what Blake's parents had in mind for him. And that's been kind of a consistent conflict throughout my relationship with his parents and with Blake in a sense, because I know that they didn't want him to be with a non-Christian woman who didn't have the same upbringing.
They would not necessarily say anything to Lisa, but it was more of the things that they said to me which brought extra tension in the way I related to Lisa, and just trying to protect Lisa's feelings as well as my family's feelings. I have love for both, so it was very difficult.
Religion didn't become an issue in our family until after Justin was born. Then both sides jumped in. Now it's an issue. When we got the news that we had to move from Long Island to Connecticut, away from our family, that was the biggest blessing in our life, because if we would have remained there, it was the family that we would go to instead of each other.
It's true. Our decisions were not based on our minds. It was based on my family, was based on Sherry's family.
Our families really played a big role in our marriage in regards to who's right, who's wrong, what should and should not be done. And that would have, I mean, our marriage was falling apart before everybody, and there was nobody there to help us.
I was raised as a Jew.
I was bat mitzvahed. I was confirmed.
It was more of a atheist type of household.
I believe in Jesus as my Savior.
I jokingly called myself a Presbyterian.
We said we were Catholic, but I don't think we've ever gone to church as a family.
I believed that when you die, your soul would go on the roof and never come down, you know, like a Frisbee.
I'm always a little worried when couples say to me, our love will carry us through. It's good to have that romantic love, but sometimes couples find that when crises arise, things that were never important before are suddenly very important. And there's a rekindling of a need to be joined to a spiritual heritage or to some sort of religious community.
We lived about 5 years in a very anti-Semitic area, and I was afraid to tell somebody I was Jewish. I was scared.
We lived under an alias name for years.
I actually changed my name for my job. I could not understand being harassed for 4 years because I was a Jew. And all of a sudden, Sherry wants to go to church. As years went by, somehow I wanted to tie myself back to my Jewishness, but I found it very, very difficult because Sherry was moving us away from that towards a Catholic lifestyle. I couldn't accept that.
When we first started dating, the reason I was interested in going to visiting several different churches was I knew that I went to church every week with my parents, and we just wanted to find one that we both felt comfortable in.
Which is really a joke because I didn't feel comfortable in any church.
But that's what we were doing.
Right.
That's
and we did that for years.
I saw myself sinking by the minute because now I know there's a God and I believed in him, but he doesn't. And I thought, did I make a mistake? I married the wrong man. I mean, this is what I thought. But I knew that I couldn't get a divorce. And there was no way I can fix this.
Very difficult. And
we could not talk about it.
And
it was too painful to talk about our differences.
We had a lot of differences. The way we were both brought up.
We couldn't compromise them. And there was really nobody to go to. I mean, if I discussed it with a priest, it was my tough luck for marrying Jewish.
When the children of Israel came into the promised land, they were told only to intermarry among their own. You're going against a good share of what Scripture has already said, and you should know that, and you're hearing that now from a Christian pastor who is telling you precisely what your Jewish rabbi would tell you as well.
You have a Jewish person who is raised either conservative, Orthodox, or Reform, and you have a Gentile person who is raised in the Catholic situation, trying to make a go of it in life. And I find it becomes very, very difficult. So my personal advice is that you look for someone of your own kind. That might sound wrong, but I think it's the best thing for marriage.
We really didn't have a very open mind about the whole situation. When Eric would be arguing his situation, I was Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. That's all I believe in. And even though he grew up this way, it's like, but no, you're wrong.
I believed, the way I was raised, that I was being punished. I believe, well, this is God's way of punishing me. And I thought, well, if I go to church and develop this relationship with the Lord, then he might forgive me for whatever it was that I may have done wrong.
And
we never talked about it, though.
And I just kept on working more and more and more. My goal in life is to climb up the corporate ladder.
What happens is, as you get older, traditions that seemed somewhat of a bother become more significant and more meaningful. And so you tend to want to hold on and maintain them. And then, of course, if you have children, you want to pass it on to the next generation. That's a very natural thing. And so I would really examine what is precious now and what you're willing to say is irrelevant, because oftentimes what's irrelevant becomes much more precious later on.
And you know how important this is to me, the religious thing?
Really? Janie might argue with that.
Janie is 4.
I know how old she is.
And I happen to have had a bar mitzvah, which is sort of a big deal.
Don't use that tone with me, that dumb shit's tone. Don't talk to me like that.
Hope, will you wait a minute?
I always tell people that when you get married, it's like a 180-degree turn. When you have your first child, it's like 360. And before you plan for that 360, you better make sure you know exactly what you're doing and be on the same page.
Religion is what you believe in and what you follow after.
I've had a bad experience with the word religion.
I was confused when we celebrated Hanukkah and Christmas, and I asked questions as to why we were doing both and not one and the other.
Celebrate everything.
My parents started fighting a lot more because my mom started going to church more, and that's why they got a divorce.
I deal with a lot of people, a lot of intermarried couples, and the children are definitely confused.
When a Jew and a Gentile come together in marriage, they rarely have any idea of the kinds of challenges they're going to face when children come on the scene. Children are not only very smart, they're very spiritual. They have a strong sense of justice. They want to know who they are, and they're looking to their parents for a sense of identity.
I never had a doubt that my children would be Jewish. It was just clear to me that any child that came from me would be a Jewish child, and Hanukkah and Passover was such a beautiful and important part of my childhood that, of course, was something that I would want for my own children.
I felt the same way, and I was so strong about it that I felt that I wouldn't have children. I'd be willing to get married but not have children if they weren't raised as believers. And that might be surprising to you.
No, I'm not surprised at all. But
but I don't think I talked about it. I told Lisa that. It was just in the back of my head.
I remember Roger's brother quietly asking me one day, are you going to have a bris? This was before I had Justin. I was pregnant with him at the time, and I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said, yeah, everything. I had no idea what a bris was.
Well, we were in the hospital birthing our second daughter, and Tom and my parents got into something in the hallway, and it was just before the Jewish holidays, and it was just so much tension and such a nightmare.
Right.
In terms of, well, if you're going to do this and we're not going to have anything to do with you.
It was a really bad timing because Lynn literally was in labor, and so we were it was kind of a stressful situation, and somehow I went out for a moment to give them an update on how Lynn was doing, and it just blew up, and and so all of a sudden they really started coming at me, and so all of that stuff really came to a surface, and then it started becoming, well, you have to do this, and if you don't do this, and there were a lot of ultimatums given, and so it had been gone from non-confrontational to very confrontational.
Right there in the hospital.
One of the issues that came up even before we found out that we were going to have a baby, Blake's mom, in anticipation of us getting ready to have children in the future, said that she couldn't wait. She had Blake's baptism dress in the closet, and she was so excited to give it to us so that our child would be baptized in it too. And that was an amazing cue for us to start talking about way in advance what is going to happen when we have this baby. Do we believe in infant baptism?
And it has not, it's not been a problem. We both really, although I was baptized as an infant, I feel like I would rather have a child make their decision on their own and be baptized when they're ready.
Sherry decided with her relatives, a sister.
My sister and brother.
To have him baptized and say, hey, Roger, do you want to come along? Yes or no? And at that point, I did. No, I went. She forced me.
I didn't force you.
Okay.
I didn't want his family to find out about it because I didn't want to hurt them. I knew that it would hurt them, and I really tried to avoid hurting them, but I just really needed to do this.
I think in Sherry's mind, if we didn't baptize Justin, he would not go to heaven.
In the faith that I grew up in, if anything were to happen to him as a child and he had not been baptized, then he would not be able to enter heaven. And so that was a fear that was placed on me, that I think any woman or mother that would have that fear placed on her would do what I did.
It was difficult times. At that point, I didn't know if I was raising my children Catholic. I had no idea. There was a total emptiness. We never really communicated as a couple.
Because I knew in his heart he was not happy with what I was doing. But in my heart, all I kept thinking of was, I'm doing it.
One way we worked out the conflicts was realizing that attacking one another was not helping. All we were doing was, in a sense, adding more fuel to the fire. We were sort of getting lost of what was at the real root of the problem.
Usually by the time a couple comes to me for counseling, they live long enough with the usual strategies to know that those strategies don't work. They're more related to the symptoms than to the cause.
There's so many things in life, difficult situations that everyone has, that I have, that I can't do alone.
It was a real test of our relationship.
There's no easy solution.
We had a very empty marriage.
Yes.
A real battle inside me of not knowing what to do.
I wanted something. I didn't know what, but I wanted something.
We started talking to other couples.
To a marriage counselor at the beginning.
We did seek the advice of an assistant pastor.
We were referred to a rabbi.
Clergy.
I couldn't talk to anybody.
I didn't know what to do.
Got on my knees and I said, God, you have got to help me with this marriage because I don't want a divorce.
Something is happening amidst the Jewish and Christian cultures that can only be described as a movement of God. When Jews and Gentiles look into the Bible, they're finding that what for centuries has driven them apart actually has the power to bring them together. Throughout the world, Christian churches are discovering the Jewish roots of their Christian faith. In the Jewish community, the word tolerance has been given a new meaning as more and more Jews are crossing a threshold they never thought to approach. They not only see Jesus as the Christian God, but now view him as the promised Jewish Messiah of the Hebrew Scriptures. Couples are finding common ground through faith in Yeshua. That a Jewish person who accepts this claim remains Jewish.
What do you mean you believe in this? How do you know? How do you know? Why are you so sure?
There's Judaism and then there's Christianity.
Believing in Christ was fine for Deb and fine for her to be a Christian. However, I was a Jew.
I only wanted something in times of trouble.
I knew that Yeshua was Jewish, but I hadn't really thought about how that would affect a Jewish person.
When couples hear the solution, they really don't believe me. Everything they've tried is on one level, and this is asking them to go to a deeper level. You see, the fact is, most of these couples are looking for something on the level of tradition only.
Before I was engaged religiously, I was a good person. I didn't break any of the Big Ten. I knew that there was a God, and that was fine for me.
Basically the same. I didn't have any specific knowledge of who Christ was, so it's hard to define myself as a Christian. Although I really did, feel some spirituality. I became a vegetarian for like about 12 years or so, and I kind of embraced all of that kind of thing. But there was really no real clear, path to God per se.
Both of us believed in God, but we defined who God was based on who we wanted him to be. But when you really started looking at who God was, God is very clear in defining himself.
It wasn't until we really started going on this journey to look for the Lord that really there were significant changes.
I had attended a Bible study for well over a year. At that same time, Tom was recording out in California. And so I was by myself. And he was hearing all this stuff over the phone.
It was odd to me, number one, that Lynn was going to a Bible study, not just because of the fact that she was Jewish, but that we just really had no real relationship with God. I started thinking, well, is this a cult? I didn't really know where she was going.
It seemed like a very logical progression, and it wasn't an overnight thing. It was really, for me, a lot of learning and studying and disagreeing, and then the more I learned, the more I really believe that the differences were manufactured. Jewish people don't really understand, in many cases, their Jewishness.
And Christians don't understand
that Jesus is the Messiah who was talked about in the Old Testament. So between those two chasms, it makes it very difficult for there to be the truth.
I think on a gut level, I understood who God was, but then when I started understanding who Christ was, that was the difference. And at one point I actually asked God to reveal himself to me, because I truly did want to know. And it was, it became real evident who he was through starting to read his word, because it's like any relationship. until you really get to know who that person is, you can't really, get close.
I saw the New Testament as simply continuing. I saw the Messiah as being something that was real, not something that we were still waiting for.
To ignore the fact that he was Jewish and all of those things that he brought to the world being a Jew, I think that it's like having just a black and white picture. And when you're able to pull all that together, now you've got this full color perspective of who he is. And that has bolstered my faith.
My life since having that revelation, having that truth in my heart, has changed radically.
Now, the union of a man and a woman in marriage is something which is of the spirit. It's unseen, it's invisible, but it's really the eternal aspect of marriage. So a husband and wife can't afford to overlook spirituality in their marriage.
If I had trouble going on in my life, I needed God, and I knew he was up there. I just didn't know that you can have a personal relationship with him. I thought, well, he hears me, what I'm saying, but whether or not he wants to do something, well, that's up to him, and if I deserve it or not.
She'd pray and I would work.
And read the Bible.
Then she'd leave the Bible out and I would shut the Bible. She'd take the Bible out, I'd put it back in the drawer.
I wouldn't say, what'd you do that for?
If we were talking about raising our kids Jewish, it wouldn't be an issue.
We just would not discuss it. It was just amazing how we lived through that.
Through my circles, people started talking about God and about Jesus. It's the Old Testament, the New Testament. Yeah, I'd be sitting at a lunch table with a client, and all of a sudden that topic would come up in conversation. And they would actually talk to me about Jesus and that he was a Jew. And I didn't realize half these people in the Bible were Jewish, from the apostles all the way throughout, and the prophets. I had no idea.
I didn't either.
I went to a chicken farm. True story. I actually, one of my first sales calls, I'm with a lady named Yvette Mackey, and we started talking. She was very nice. Actually, we started talking about religion. So I go, here we go again.
At that very same time period, I was on my knees to God, literally. You've got to save us. And I started flicking through the channel. I was through the channels. I was depressed, just sitting on the couch. And all of a sudden, there's this guy. And he's yelling out to the audience, hey, you out there, are you married to a Jewish fella? Come to my congregation. And I'm like, what is this guy? Who is this guy? We believe in Jesus. We call him Yeshua. I grabbed the pen. I wrote the number down. And I said, I can't believe it. There's a place that we can go to where we can be both.
So I come home. I started talking to Sherry about this book.
And I was all excited.
So she goes, I got this great congregation that we can go visit on Friday night. And you didn't want to go at first, but you hesitated. I said, let's go. Now, Sherry didn't tell me.
Well, I did tell you. I told you that it was for both. I was terrified in a sense because I've never been in a group situation where so many people were together worshiping God like that.
Sherry prayed. Point. She didn't converse with me, and I never really spoke about it. And then eventually...
as we grew in this congregation that we went to that brought unity to our marriage and showed us that there was a way that we can share in one faith, I was crying out to God to really help me because I realized that the needs that I had in my life, nobody can fill. Roger was not able to, and I really truly needed God to fill those needs. But it was during that time, right after, that he started showing me things about myself that I was never even aware of. It was a very personal experience.
So in my case, I need things in black and white. I actually compared the Old Testament with the New Testament and realized it is one continuation. And through the words that Jesus spoke, I became a believer.
We can see the beauty of both religions together. Watching Roger learn about his Jewishness and me learning about where Christianity came from, it fulfills me just as deeply to know that this is just one big, beautiful picture.
Believing in Christ was fine for Deb and fine for her to be a Christian. However, I was a Jew. I did not believe I needed Christ. I was fine practicing my my family traditions that they had taught me growing up to practice. These are holidays you practice as a Jew. These are traditions you practice as a Jew. That was enough for me.
But that gave me a chance to explain my viewpoint and what I believed and how that affected me and my family and the people I loved.
I think for myself, going through college was a great time of growth. I wasn't happy at times and I wasn't sure for what reasons. And I think I got to a point after meeting Deb where I realized there's something more to living life other than just that. It was me becoming educated myself and finding out that I need to become educated with God and bringing God back into my life.
If you've ever heard those insane vows that husbands and wives say to each other at their wedding, you know that there has to be some sort of a foundation that will carry them through to fulfilling those vows.
Meeting Lisa, a Jewish woman who was not a believer, was actually one of the best things that could have happened to me.
Because I was challenging him every moment. What do you mean you believe in this? How do you know?
The conversations really were not arguments, especially at the beginning. They were fairly deep discussions on why it was I believed what I believed. And honestly, many times I said, I don't know, and I'll come back to you on that.
Blake and I were going to lots of different churches and religious services. And in the beginning, the places that we went to were very formal. You stand up, you sit down, you do the standard reading. Everything seemed very, very scripted and
which is, of course, exactly
artificial.
what I was used to, so I felt perfectly at home.
And I started going to places that were much more focused on having a relationship with God and less on structure. And I started noticing things in Blake, like, for example, if there was a time when he was going through something difficult, I would find him in the bathroom reading a devotion. And he's hiding in the bathroom, having that quiet moment to be with God. And I realized that he just wasn't hanging out with God on Sundays, that this was a relationship that he had Monday through Sunday, and that he felt that he needed to hide in the bathroom in order to communicate with God.
I realized that this is a personal relationship, and it wasn't just going to church.
And from that, going to the Bible and reading what God's purpose and plan was for me, and then learning about why I need a Messiah and who is the Messiah. And so believing in Yeshua was a very Jewish thing to do. I mean, he was the King of the Jews. All of the disciples were Jewish.
To me, it meant that there were probably other Jewish believers, and that it wasn't turning your back on your heritage, because really it was part of your heritage.
Our marriage today has completely changed. I mean, the way we communicate, it's open. It comes from our hearts.
We now have a purpose. We know where our marriage is going now.
And we didn't have to hide our identities, which is very important.
We have direction now in our life in regards to our marriage. We know where to take our problems. If we have issues that come up, we're not afraid to talk about them anymore. We have 4 very beautiful children. As a result of our unity, they're secure now. They know who they are.
So it was kind of a liberating process. Where we went became a little bit less important. And the relationship with God was what was guiding our decisions at that point. That's when we started really communicating.
And we lit the menorah as a family and said the prayers.
Every night.
I know that it was very meaningful to Lisa. It was very meaningful to me. And my family, they're starting to understand, starting to get it.
For me to have a relationship with God, I mean, a side benefit has been a greater understanding of my husband and bringing that relationship into our home as the center of all the things that we do.
Children came into it. So then now all of a sudden we're really looking at all these issues that started to surface. Well, what do we do with her Judaism? What do we do with her background? How are we going to raise our children?
It wasn't anything that we had to decide. Are we going to raise them Jewish? Or are we going to raise them Christian? We knew that we were going to raise them in the faith that we shared. The hardest thing for me personally is the idea of the belief in Judaism that there is one God. And here we are talking in Christianity about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And those being three in one, and how that is just such an outrageous betrayal in Judaism because there's only one God. But then I look at myself. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a daughter, and I'm still one person. Those are just different attributes of that one.
The difference since we have become believers with the relationship, especially with Lynn's parents, is just awesome.
But I think they're more comforted because they say, how are you? Your kids aren't going to be fish. They're not going to be fowl. No one's going to know what they are. They're not going to know what they are. They're going to be confused. And they have found that that really has not been the case. Personally, I think kids are more confused when mom goes to church and dad stays home. I think kids are more confused when parents themselves are not in agreement about the faith. We're in agreement, so they don't see anything to be confused about.
Once you do accept this great gift, it affects your life exponentially every day from there on out. It becomes greater and greater, and it's so much harder and harder each day to believe, what have I done to have this gift bestowed upon me? It's an absolute amazing feeling, and without that, it's really difficult to imagine how life was previous to that.
The greatest thing that I can say, our relationship with God and what it's done is the wonderful relationship that it's allowed to happen between myself and my wife. Because when you have that, all of these other things really come into perspective, whether it be your kids, because we're in agreement on how to raise them. Everything that we do is wonderful as a result of that. We have God in the center, and we have this wonderful relationship.
Just dream with me. Imagine the two of you being fully united in one faith, worshiping one God, with neither of you having to relinquish your unique ethnicity or heritage, with the Jewish partner not having to abandon their Jewishness, or the Christian partner not having to relinquish their Christian faith. The solution is very simple, and it has less to do with religious affiliation or compromise or conversion than it has to do with trust and faith.
It's not something that we decided. It's something that was already decided long ago. We just discovered it. It's like a little treasure.
There is no difference. There really is just a continuation, much more common ground.
Neither one of us have to give up anything. We're together.
Now, together, we're of the same mindset.
Peace. I have inner peace for the first time in my life.
I get it now. What do you get? I get it. What do you mean? You know, I get it.
My parents are united with a common faith, and that's what holds our family together.
I get the best of both worlds.
Well, my mom is Gentile, my dad is Jewish. They raised me in one faith that they shared together.
When it comes to your children and the spiritual legacy they deserve, you can't give them what you don't have, and you need a relationship with God. The real question is, are you willing to pursue a spiritual reality, a genuine relationship with God so authentic that it will compel your children to follow?
Everyone is hurt and we are all lost.
So no one is exempt from sin and death. Who can compare or even dare to say they haven't sinned? But
He has come so you become what you struggle to be.
He knows the dark places within your heart. There is nothing hidden within.
He has lived in your shoes, yet there is none who can stand before him. He has lived in your shoes.
He has bled and was bruised, and he did so freely.
Because he chose to fulfill the promise of God. If we could see what he saw
all along, all the gall, all the self-imposed walls
of God's children living, hurting, and striving to impress. But because of our sin, we fight emptiness.
Where do you begin? Begin with him.
With your heart,
You must recognize the Messiah, the chosen Holy One who
collects our tears and gives life to the numb.
Don't succumb to a life of strife and emptiness.
There is a treasure that awaits, a soaring life and a righteousness through faith.
So that every heart that is set apart could know the life that he can give them. He came to show us love and a life everlasting. We are guilty.
He was innocent.
He was condemned.
We are set free.
My religion is God. No one really knows what religion God is until you get to heaven.
You should praise God because He made you and He loves you.
God is the creator.
Being raised by parents who believe the same thing and we can all share one faith really unites my family.
I just can't imagine having one without the other.